Hello everybody, this is Grandmaster Damian Lemos for onlinechesslessons.net. In this video we are gonna analyze a game between Grandmaster Tukmakov and Grandmaster Kasparov. So we continue with Kasparov's series, and in this example Kasparov is playing black, and as you know, one of his main openings against d4 is black. It's the King's Indian. So we'll see a King's Indian here. After d4, knight to f6. White plays c4, and black plays c6. White plays knight to c3. As you see, white usually wants to get space in the center here, and black plays bishop to c7. If black plays d5 here, then we are playing what we call the Granville defense. But okay, bishop g7, it's a King's Indian. e4, d6, bishop to e2, black castles here, and usually white here plays knight to f3 and he continues with castle. Although in this game white plays bishop to c5, and this is what we call the Averbakh variation. The idea of bishop c5 is simply to stop e5, which is the most natural move black plays in King's Indian. I mean, if you are a King's Indian player, you surely know that black plays e5 most of the times. But problem here is if we play e5 as black, then white can simply take, and after pawn takes, white can take on d8, rook takes, and here when he plays knight to d5, our knight on f6 is under a pin, and he's also threatening the c7 pawn and the rook on a8. And as you can see here, there's no way for black to stop both threats at the same time. So that is the problem of playing e5. White simply wins material here. That is why in this game black decides to play another move. Instead of playing e5, black decides to play in like the Benko or Benoni style by playing c5 here. The bonus of playing c5, which is a move that we can play in some King's Indian, it's that the bishop on c7, this diagonal is going to be open. If we play e5 in King's Indian, the bishop c7 diagonal is going to be closed. So that is why here after c5 white plays d5, and as we said the diagonal is open, and here is where black takes and makes a big decision playing b5, which is this reminds me a bit of the Benko Gambit. But as you know, the Benko usually sacrifices a pawn for black, and unless we find some big compensation, usually white, if he plays a solid chess, he keeps his extra pawn, and usually this pawn makes a difference, this extra pawn makes a difference in the endgame. So I mean, it's a risky decision. As we'll see in this game, it was the right decision, but again, be careful when you play the Benko, because we can play this kind of sacrifices in so many lines, right? We can play the Benko itself, we can play the Benko when we play the King's Indian, depending on what white plays. But in this specific line with bishop c5, I don't feel the Benko is the best option we can play as black. So after a6, Here white plays a4, and usually yeah, this is a nice way to support the b5 pawn, and in so many lines you'll see that rook a3, it's a very nice move too. Basically defending the knight on c3, getting out of this diagonal, and in some lines if black takes on b5, then the rook on a1 is not in danger. So here we understand why, you know, a4 plus rook a3, it's usually a very nice maneuver to play against this Benko Gambit in King's Indian. So here black plays h6, pushing this bishop back, and white plays bishop to d2. Well, white plays solid, and then all he has to do is finish his development to get a better position with the extra pawn, and that is why I think he plays bishop d2. If he plays something like this, I think black can speed his initiative up here and continue like firing in the center. We know he's weakening his king a bit, but since we are down a pawn, best we can do here as black is, again, you know, speed our development up. So this makes a lot of sense. So okay, here white plays bishop to d2 immediately, and Kasparov plays e6. Again, we have to understand that as black we are down a pawn, so we have to create a lot of counterplay in the center as soon as possible. White takes, bishop takes, e6, knight to f3, pawn takes b5, and bishop takes. So here, as we were saying, white wants to play solid and keep his extra pawn, and this pawn is gonna be decisive in the endgame probably, or middle game too. But let's take a look, because we know white cannot take on b5 with the knight, because then the e4 pawn is also hanging. But we have to see what happens if he takes on b5 with the a pawn. Here we can play bishop b3, which is a deviation move, attacking the queen on d1, and I mean the rook on a1 as well. He cannot take the bishop because we're gonna just take the rook. And if he plays queen c1, after this the extra pawn is not strong enough, and we can see that the e4 pawn, it's gonna fall sooner or later. So I think black's position here is great. So that is why here white takes on b5 with the bishop, which makes a lot of sense. And here we need to find a way to continue our development as black, and we have to concentrate on finding some compensation, because if we play natural moves only, white is gonna play with the extra pawn. So black plays the knight to a6, white castles, finishing his development, and here we play a knight to c7 as black. This move looks tempting because the knight looks great there, but as we can see, I mean, we are not going anywhere. White can play something like this, and since we cannot play d5 anymore because the c5 pawn is gonna be under attack, and d5 here looks like the freeing move for black. I mean, feels like our position is not comfortable. And on the other hand, if we play knight c7, you know, we want to take the bishop, and once we take the bishop we are taking the bishop pair, so this makes a lot of sense. Here white decides to play rook to e1, And again, white is playing in a solid way. But you know, if he plays the bishop somewhere like, let's say, bishop e2, then as black we can play d5, and I guess we have some compensation. I mean, we are still down a pawn, but as you know, in the Benko usually we have some ideas. I guess white should still be better because he's up a pawn, but I mean, we decided to sacrifice a pawn in the opening, so the best we can get, I mean, it's compensation. I don't think we can get more than this in this variation. But if I remember well, Kasparov needed to win this game in order to win the championship. So that is why I think he played this risky. So after rook e1, we get the bishop pair, and white takes with the knight, which makes a lot of sense. If white takes with the pawn again, this pawn is going to be weak sooner or later, and since we have the bishop pairs black, I don't feel like you know, taking with the pawn on b5 it's the best answer. If white wants to play for the win, he needs his pawns connected, so that is why, you know, taking with the knight on b5 makes a lot of sense. And here, as we have the bishop pair again, you have to know that the bishops are great in open positions, so that is why black plays d5 here. It's very simple. We need to open as many lines as possible when we have the bishops, especially the bishop pair. And again, you know, we are down a pawn, so we need to find some activity and compensation. Otherwise, little by little, white is gonna consolidate his position, and we are gonna be playing down a pawn. Pawn takes, knight takes, and here we start looking at some compensation, some nice activity, but white plays knight to e5. Very nice way of blockading our bishop. And in a lot of variations, as you can see, white can play knight to c6, bothering our queen as well. But as black, we play rook to e8, which is putting more pressure, especially on, you know, the knight on e5. I mean, this knight is not well supported, so in so many lines we can consider, you know, attacking this knight with the bishop and the rook. And white plays rook c1. Looks like little by little, as I said, white is consolidating his position. He has a solid foundation, and he keeps his extra pawn, so now he wants to take another one, which is the weak pawn on c5. So here it's not easy to suggest a move for black. I mean, he wants to take the c5 pawn. We can maybe defend this pawn by playing this, but looks like we are already defending. We are down a pawn and we are losing the initiative, which is so important. So maybe if we play something like bishop f8, it's pretty much the same. We are only defending. The bishop is leaving from this strong diagonal, so overall doesn't look like a good deal for black. So that is why here Kasparov prefers sacrificing another pawn, but he'll get such nice activity. So here we can point out this concept. Sometimes when you're playing, material is not that important. If you have the initiative, sometimes that is much more important than material. So that is why black plays the bishop to f5. Right now we are defending this c5 pawn because, I mean, white cannot take it. The knight on e5, it's under attack. So that is why white has to play knight c6. This is a very ambitious move because white can also play a simple move like knight to c4. He's up a pawn already, but maybe here after rook takes e1, bishop takes, I still believe this is not that easy for white, especially because we have the bishop pair and the knight on f4 has a lot of champs. So, like I said before, black always has some, compensation here. But as I said before, knight c6, it's a bit ambitious here. What I see is he's gonna take the c5 pawn in the next move. But we play queen d7, rook takes c5. This is not only to grab another pawn, but white wants to defend his knight, obviously. Rook takes e1, check. Queen takes e1, and here we can see that the first rank it's already unprotected. Imagine he plays a bishop takes e1. We can play rook e8, and in a lot of variations we can try knight f4. For instance, if he plays this, I mean, he's promoting. Looks like white is winning without doing much, but we can play knight f4, and we have multiple threats here. Like if queen takes, we can just mate him. We have knight e2, knight d3, a lot of ideas, and it's really hard to stop all these threats for white. So that is why I like this, and that is why I think white took on e1 with the queen. But here we speed our development up, playing a rook e8, winning more tempos. We have to remember we are 2 pawns down, so we have to find some activity, otherwise it's gonna be very hard for us. White plays queen to c1. Let's see what happens if he plays queen f1. Then I guess we can play knight to b6, like a black played in this game, attacking the a4 pawn, and we also threat, in a lot of variations, bishop to d3, which is a big threat too. As you can see, white pieces are not well coordinated. White plays queen c1, knight to b6, attacking a4, so b3, and rook to e2. So little by little we see how our pieces are entering white's position. It looks like all his pieces at queenside are not well coordinated. So this is gonna pay off. And despite the fact that white is probably better with this big amount of material advantage, the fact that he has to defend during this game, and it's not easy to deal with the bishop pair and so many threats at kingside, I feel, if I had the chance, I would, choose black pieces in this position. White plays bishop a5, and here we ignore the threat and we play bishop to e4. Again, we can see we have a lot of threats at kingside. I mean, I don't think white can even consider playing bishop takes b6, because here we can play queen g4. We threat queen takes g2 mate, and well, if he plays f3, we can still mate him. So after queen f1, we have the simple rook e1, deviating the queen, and then we mate on c2. And if he plays anything else, we can still play queen takes c2, and it's mate because the queen cannot take on c2. Well, rook takes f1 would be also winning, but what we can see here is that, again, all white pieces ended up at queenside doing nothing, whereas our pieces are attacking at kingside, and this requires a very accurate defense by white, who plays knight e5 and queen to e7. Now we are putting more pressure in that position, and you know, if he takes the knight here, we have bishop takes e5 at least, I mean, and we have a lot of threats too. These two bishops are monsters attacking the king. So I mean, we have this warranty. But white plays a knight to d4. Again, a very ambitious move. But I think this is a critical mistake in this game. Of course, it's not easy to find good variations for white here, because it's not easy to defend with so many pieces hanging. But looks like the best move is queen f1, attacking the rook and defending that position. And well, looks like we can take, but then we can also take here. A lot of pieces hanging, you know. If queen takes, bishop takes b6. If bishop takes, looks like I can take here. So I mean, I'll have to play something like this, and I mean, the tension is still there. A lot of threats, a lot of ideas. Again, it's really hard to defend here as white. I mean, it's hard to believe knight d4, it's a big mistake. He's attacking our rook. The knight is back to defense. All his pieces are connected. So, hard to believe. Again, this is a bad move. And we play rook a2. Here we have to see that the first rank is also very weak. I mean, moves like queen takes c5 may appear. So white plays bishop takes b6. We play bishop takes e5, and again here white makes a big mistake. I guess this was time travel already, but again, it's easy to understand a mistake like this, especially because white is under a lot of pressure here. These two bishops again, the queen, the rook, and it requires such an accurate play to defend this position. In this game, white plays queen e3, but as we said, the first rank was so weak. Here queen takes c5, it's doing it. I mean, we are playing rook a1 next, and we are mating him. Otherwise, we win a big amount of material here, so I guess instead of queen e3, white can still try playing queen e1, for instance. But he's not threatening the bishop, actually, because we always have rook a1. So we can continue like this, creating big threats. And, well, he can probably play something like knight e2. But, you know, after bishop takes h2, I would still prefer black's position. This is so complicated. But a lot of pieces hanging. We have the bishops. This rook is doing a lot of damage. So again, what we can learn from this game is that, especially in middle game, if we have to choose between defending like a poor middle game or sacrificing more material in order to get strong attack and activity, we should choose the second option. Like in this game, maybe the opening wasn't great, but the middle game and the energy black put in this game, it's really impressive. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in future videos.